At first glance, it looked like just a simple gate, one of those decorative iron things with a little lock on it. But the moment I saw it standing on my lake yard, bolted into my fence like it belonged there, I knew exactly who did it. Karen, president of the neighboring HOA. Lover of rules, except when they apply to her. She built a gate from her subdivision directly into my private ranch property, without permission, without a word, and without a single legal right to touch my land. When I confronted her, she called 911 and tried to claim I was the trespasser. Big mistake, because the next morning, while she was sipping her HOA brewed coffee, I had a concrete crew on site. By nightfall, her gate didn't lead to my land anymore. It led straight into a wall. There's something sacred about land that touches water. My ranch isn't flashy. It's not manicured like those HOA homes with carbon copy lawns and hedges trimmed to regulation height. It's a working property, open space, wind-bent trees, and a stretch of grassy slope that rolls down into a wide, glimmering lake. It's the kind of place that breathes, that calms you the second you step out of the truck and smell the cedar, the moss, the breeze coming off the water. It's also mine. The land, the shoreline, the gate, the fence, I own it all. Deeded, recorded, and paid for in full. And unlike the subdivision that sits along the opposite ridge, I don't answer to an HOA. No duas. No newsletters. No neighbors telling me what color to paint a barn I built with my own two hands. For years, it was peaceful, until Karen showed up. The subdivision that borders the west side of my property was built about 5 years ago. I didn't mind it much at first. It was separated from my land by a thin belt of trees and a narrow slope. I figured they'd keep to themselves. But HOAs don't like boundaries, especially when someone like Karen is running the board. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a flyer left in my mailbox. It said something about a community cleanup happening around the lake's edge. It was addressed to all residents enjoying the shared lake space. Shared. That word sat wrong. I called the number at the bottom, Karen's, and politely informed her that the lake shore on my side wasn't shared. It was fenced. It was private. And it had been in my family since before her subdivision was a blueprint on a desk. She was cordial, at first. Said there must have been a mistake. Promised to update her records. I should have known better. 3 weeks later, I noticed something strange while out checking the perimeter fence. A couple of stakes had been driven into the ground, bright orange flags flapping on top. They were positioned along the tree line between my land and the HOA subdivision. Survey markers. I didn't move them, just made a mental note. 2 days later, I found workers on my side of the tree line, unloading tools and stacking lumber. I stepped out of my truck, boots crunching the gravel, and called out, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" One of them looked up. "We're building a gate. HOA told us this is access to the lake trail." I walked right up to them. Calm. Steady. "That's not a lake trail. That's my yard. And that's my fence." The man's brow furrowed. "We're just doing what we were told." I nodded. "Not your fault. But your boss got bad instructions." They stopped working. I called the number again. Karen didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. The next morning, I walked out to find a gate already installed. It had been bolted directly into my fence line, complete with a padlock and hinges that swung outward into my yard. I stood there staring at it for a long time. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was illegal. That was when I took out my phone, snapped pictures from every angle, and called her. This time, she answered. "Karen," I said, voice low, "you put a gate into my private land. That fence is mine. That yard is mine. I didn't authorize this." Her voice was syrupy. "It's just for community lake access. I thought we could share." "Share." I repeated. "This isn't a potluck, Karen. It's private property." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "We've always treated the lake as shared." I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Take it down." Today. That's where her tone changed. "You know," she said, "technically, you're obstructing lake access from the community. I could file a report." "Do what you need to do," I replied. "But if that gate's still there tomorrow, I'll handle it." And then I hung up. That afternoon, while I was back in the barn replacing a fuel filter on the tractor, I heard tires crunching down my drive. I wiped my hands and stepped outside, and saw 2 sheriff's deputies walking toward me. Behind them, Karen, arms crossed, watching like she expected a front row seat to a takedown. One of the deputies nodded politely. Sir, we got a call about a dispute regarding access and possible threats. I raised an eyebrow. Threats? Karen spoke up. He confronted our community contractors and said he'd handle it himself. We're worried about safety. This is a civil matter, but I wanted to document it before it got worse. I looked at the deputies. Calm, unshaken. You boys mind walking over here with me? They followed me to the gate. I showed them the fresh bolts, the padlock, the fact that it was installed directly into my existing fence. Then I pulled out my deed and pointed to the line that marked the boundary. This entire stretch, including the fence, the slope, the shoreline, and everything within, is part of my parcel. I have the original survey in my office if you need more. The deputies took a moment to walk the edge, talk to each other, then one of them returned to me. Sir, you're within your rights. That fence was clearly tampered with. This gate doesn't belong here. Then he walked back to Karen. Ma'am, unless you can show us documentation proving an easement or shared use agreement, we have to consider this an unauthorized structure on private land. Karen's face turned red. But the lake isn't the issue, the deputy cut in. The land is. She sputtered, tried to argue, claimed I was being hostile, but the officers weren't buying it. One of them gave her a formal verbal warning and told her to remove the gate within 48 hours, or I'd be within my rights to dismantle it myself. Karen didn't look victorious anymore. She looked like someone who just realized she brought the law to a place where the law wasn't on her side. That night, I sat on my porch and stared at the water. Not because I was angry, but because I knew Karen. She wasn't going to back down. Not yet. People like her don't give up when they're wrong. They just get quieter and sneakier. And that's when the idea started to form. If she thought she could put a gate through my fence, maybe it was time I made sure she never had access to that fence again. Karen may have backed off when the deputy sided with me, but I knew that look in her eyes. The one she gave when she turned back toward her car, clutching her clipboard like it was a weapon holster. She wasn't done, so neither was I. That night, I pulled out every piece of paperwork I'd ever collected on this land. Deed, plat maps, topographical surveys, well rights, fencing permits. I spread them across my dining table like I was prepping for war. Because that's what this was now. Not a neighbor dispute. A boundary war. The original deed to the ranch was crystal clear. The parcel included the entire western slope that ran to the edge of the lake. The fence Karen tampered with wasn't even close to the property line. It was a good 10 feet inside. I pulled out the satellite images I'd downloaded a few years back from the county assessor's portal. Zoomed in, checked where her subdivision ended and my property began. There was no ambiguity, no shared easement, no recorded right-of-way, no community lake access, just private land. My land. The next morning, I drove into town and walked straight into my attorney's office. Harold has been my lawyer for years. Property law specialist, quiet voice, mean in court. I dropped the paperwork on his desk. She built a gate into my fence, I said. Claims it's shared access. He flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. She called the cops. Yep. They left on my side. He smiled. Good. Then he pulled out a legal pad and started writing. What do you want to do? He asked. I want to make it permanent and legal. I want them to know they crossed the line, and I want something they can't tear down next time I'm gone for a weekend. He nodded again. We start with a cease and desist. By the end of the day, Karen had a certified letter taped to her front door and hand-delivered by courier. You are hereby instructed to immediately cease all unauthorized access, trespass, or modification of property belonging to protagonist's full name, including but not limited to the unauthorized gate structure installed without consent. The letter went on for 2 pages. It cited the relevant property codes, zoning ordinances, trespass law, and photographic evidence. It ended with a 72-hour deadline. Remove the gate, or legal action begins. Karen didn't reply directly, but 2 days later, the gate was still there. So I had Harold send a second letter, this time addressed to the entire HOA board. And that's when the pushback started. A different board member responded with a letter of their own. It was polite, couched in formal legalese, but made their position clear. The HOA views the lake as a shared community feature and believes that all residents should have access to the shoreline via a safe and managed path. They weren't just backing Karen. They were trying to rewrite reality. So I hit them with something they couldn't argue. I ordered a licensed surveyor to come out and ref flag the boundary line. Bright orange stakes, laser measured, GPS mapped, and when they finished, the result was worse for Karen than even I expected. Her gate didn't just cross the property line. It sat nearly 7 feet deep into my yard. And the installation crew? They dug post holes that cut through irrigation lines I'd buried along the slope. That changed everything. Now, it wasn't just trespass, it was property damage. I had the surveyor draft a formal report and attach it to a second package of evidence I delivered, again, to the HOA and Karen. But this time, I copied the county planning office. And just for fun, I dropped a copy off with the sheriff's department, too, since they were already familiar with the issue. Karen was officially out of options. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, and from what one of the other homeowners told me afterward, it didn't go well. They weren't expecting your evidence to be that tight, the neighbor said. Karen kept saying the lake should be for everyone, but the board's lawyer flat out told them it wasn't about the lake, it was about land. And that land's yours. After that, things got quiet. Too quiet. Karen stopped sending messages. The gate sat untouched, and I knew what that meant. She was hoping I'd let it go. Let it sit long enough that no one would remember who was right and who was wrong. But I don't let go of things like that. I make them unforgettable. That weekend, I sat down with Harold again and explained what I wanted to do. Not legal action. Construction. He raised an eyebrow. A fence. No, I said. A wall. He leaned back. Tell me more. I want to build a permanent barrier. Something she can't cut through, climb over, or claim belongs to her. I want to shut that gate off forever. And I want to do it by code, by regulation, and by the book. Harold smiled. Then you're going to love this. He pulled out a zoning map. Turns out, my property's classification allowed for privacy structures up to 6 feet tall without a permit, as long as they were within 10 feet of the boundary line. And since Karen's gate already violated the setback, the county would have zero authority to stop me from building directly in front of it. In fact, I could build a wall so close to her gate that she wouldn't be able to swing it open in either direction. He drafted a formal build notice and posted it with the county clerk. Then I made the call. A local contractor I'd worked with before, Dale, a no-nonsense guy with a small crew and a passion for clean lines and strong concrete. We walked the site together. I showed him the survey flags, the slope, and where I wanted the wall. How fast can you do it? I asked. He looked at the gate, spat into the grass, and grinned. You want it done this weekend? Friday afternoon, the trucks rolled in. They poured the footings before sunset. Saturday morning, they framed the barrier. Rebar, poured concrete, cured panels, smoothed edges. By Saturday night, a 6-foot solid wall stood across the slope, clean, unbroken, and aligned perfectly with the property line. It wasn't fancy. It was final. Karen's gate, still locked, still standing. But now it opened into a wall, a dead end, a monument to every overreach and excuse she'd ever tried. I added one more touch before I went to bed that night. A small wooden sign, nailed neatly into the center of the new wall. Private property, no access. Trespassers will be photographed and fined. Then I poured myself a glass of tea, sat on the porch, and waited. Because I knew it wouldn't be long before Karen came to see what her gate looked like from the other side. There's a kind of satisfaction you can't buy with money or even win in court. It's the satisfaction of watching someone realize, too late, that they bet on the wrong lie. By Saturday night, the wall was done. 6 feet high, solid poured concrete. No gaps, no vete. And every inch of it sat inside my property line. A fact so well documented and verified that even the county inspector couldn't argue with it. But the best part? Karen hadn't seen it yet. I told Dale and his crew to finish late, after sunset. They worked with floodlights, trowels, and gloved hands, smoothing the last layer with the precision of masons working a monument. We even added a slight decorative trim at the top. Nothing fancy, just enough to make it look deliberate. Intentional, because it was. Every line of that wall said, "This is mine, and you were never invited. By midnight, the job was done. By morning, the wall had cured enough to stand firm. By the time Karen opened her blinds, it was already over. I was sipping my morning coffee on the porch when I heard the sound of heels, quick, furious steps stomping through grass. Then a gasp, loud enough to echo over the slope. "Are you kidding me?" I didn't even need to turn around. I knew the sound of her voice better than any bird in these parts. I stood, slow and calm, and walked toward the fence. She was on the other side of the gate, rattling it like she expected it to magically break open. But it didn't swing. It didn't move, because it now opened into a flat, immovable slab of concrete. "What the hell is this?" she shouted. "Boundary," I said. She sputtered. "You can't just build a wall. You blocked access." "No, iraplia. A blocked trespass." Her face flushed red. "This is illegal. You'll be hearing from the HOA and city code enforcement." I nodded slowly. "Please do reach out to them. I filed the paperwork last week. You'll find it's all perfectly legal." True to her word, Karen did file a complaint. Several of them. First to the HOA board, though most of them had already distanced themselves after the cease and desist went public. Then to the city zoning department, who had already stamped my compliance letter and emailed me a confirmation. Then she tried a wild move. She called the local code enforcement division and reported unauthorized construction impeding community lake access. The next day, a white city pickup rolled down my drive. The inspector stepped out, clipboard in hand, and introduced himself. "I got a complaint about a wall," he said. I gestured toward it. "There it is." He walked the length of it, tape measure in one hand, zoning map in the other. He took photos, measured setbacks, checked for any sign of easement or encroachment. Then he turned to me and said, "This might be the cleanest build I've seen in 6 months." I laughed. "That's what happens when you play it by the book." He nodded. "You're good here. She'll have to find a new hobby." When Karen got that report, I thought she might explode. Instead, she pivoted. Suddenly, it wasn't about lake access. It was about community cohesion. She wrote a post on the neighborhood app claiming I was creating division, that I was hostile, that I refused to cooperate with reasonable compromise. I screenshotted it and posted back, attaching the photos of her unauthorized gate, the cease and desist letter, the survey, and the zoning approval of the wall. No words, just facts. Within an hour, her post was flooded with comments like, "Wait, he owns the whole slope? Why would you build a gate on someone else's property? Karen, I love you, but this was a step too far." The HOA board went radio silent. Her support vanished overnight, but she wasn't done. A week later, she held an emergency HOA meeting and invited all homeowners to discuss the unlawful wall obstructing lake access. I was invited, probably as a prop, so I showed up. I brought a manila envelope and nothing else. She opened with a dramatic speech about community resources, shared beauty, and dangerous precedent. Then she called me up. I stood in front of the room, calm as ever, and pulled out a certified copy of my property deed, a boundary survey signed by a licensed professional, the cease and desist letter, photos of the original gate, the code compliance approval from the city inspector, and finally, the HOA's own governing document, which clearly stated they had no jurisdiction over non-member properties. Then I said only this: "You don't need to like my wall, but you do need to respect it, because it's legal, it's permanent, and it's mine. And the next person who touches it without permission will be talking to my lawyer, not the HOA." Silence. Then scattered applause. Then someone in the back muttered, "Should have left him alone in the first place." Karen turned red again. But this time, she didn't speak. She packed her things and left. By the end of the month, I heard she'd voluntarily stepped down from a board, claimed she needed more time to focus on family, which was HOA code for "I lost the fight and now I'm the punchline." The gate? Still there. Still locked. Still opening into a cold, gray wall. Neighbors started calling it the Great Wall of Karen. A few even joked they wanted to add security lights and a plaque. One day, someone slipped a note under my front door. "Thanks for drawing the line, literally." If Karen had any self-awareness, the wall might have been her quiet cue to back off and move on. But Karen wasn't built for retreat. The day after our HOA meeting, where I dropped the deed, the survey, and the city stamp of approval like a legal sledgehammer, Karen began damage control. Not by apologizing, not by removing the gate, but by doing what she did best, spinning a story. She went door to door across her subdivision with manila folders and handouts titled Property Access Rights. What the board won't tell you. Inside were maps she'd marked up herself, circles drawn with highlighters, arrows pointing toward traditional lake access corridors. She told anyone who would listen that I was trying to privatize the community lake, that I had manipulated zoning loopholes, and that my wall was a threat to neighborhood harmony. Harmony? This from a woman who built a gate into a fence she didn't own and called 911 when someone told her no. But Karen didn't let facts slow her down. She claimed I'd yelled at contractors. She said I was confrontational with children who played near the slope. She even hinted that I had military-grade surveillance pointed at residents' backyards. All of it nonsense. But when someone's built a throne on fear and HOA authority, the last thing they want is a neighbor who knows the law and isn't afraid to enforce it. Trouble was, her story didn't hold up under even the tiniest bit of scrutiny, because people had seen the gate. They'd read the news article about the 911 call. They'd seen the actual map, shared publicly at the HOA meeting, proving the gate was on my land and that the wall was well within my rights to build. So when Karen started spreading her story, what she got back wasn't sympathy. It was laughter. One neighbor asked her, "If that land belongs to him, how exactly is your gate legal?" Another replied, "Wait, isn't that the guy who served you with a cease and desist and won?" Even the sheriff's office got tired of her nonsense. She filed a follow-up report, trying to escalate the 911 incident, saying I'd threatened to dismantle community property and used language aggressive in nature. The responding deputy? Same one from the first visit. He returned her call, and from what I heard later, the conversation was short and not in her favor. They reminded her that I had recorded all communication. I had never crossed her property line. Her use of 911 was baseless and improper. And while they didn't fine her, she was officially warned that misusing emergency services again could result in a criminal citation. So now she wasn't just exposed. She was on record. And in a community obsessed with bylaws and documentation, that's the scarlet letter. Meanwhile, her gate, still standing, still padlocked, still leading straight into 6 feet of cold, unapologetic concrete. It didn't swing anymore. It barely rattled. Weeds started growing around the base. The once fresh paint began to peel, and still she refused to take it down. That gate had become her monument. Not to access, not to authority, but to embarrassment. The neighbors noticed, too. They stopped calling it the wall. They gave it a name. The Great Wall of Karen. It started as a joke in the HOA group chat. Then it spread. Someone made a meme of her gate with a caption. In case of emergency, please walk directly into reinforced concrete. Another neighbor took a picture of the wall and posted it online with hashtags like hashtag Gate to Nowhere and hashtag Karen Can't Climb. I even overheard 2 kids riding past on bikes say, "That's where the HOA tried to break in and lost." Despite all this, Karen still tried to rally the HOA one last time. She hosted a backyard informational session for residents, printed flyers, set up folding chairs, had lemonade and cookies. But no one came, except one family who thought it was a birthday party. They left after 10 minutes. That was the day she started keeping her blinds closed. That was the day the gate stopped getting cleaned. And that was the day it became very clear to everyone in the neighborhood. Karen had lost. The HOA board quietly replaced her as president. No announcement, no ceremony, just a new name in the newsletter and a polite mention of leadership restructuring. No one asked questions. They were too busy enjoying the fact that the board wasn't meddling for once. Complaints dropped. Fines de Christ. People smiled more. And every time someone passed the wall, they chuckled, because that 6-foot slab had done what no motion, no vote, no petition ever could. It put an end to Karen's reign. One afternoon, I found a note slipped into my mailbox. Handwritten, no name. It said, "Thank you for standing your ground. Thank you for reminding people that the law still matters. And thank you for building something we could all laugh at. I folded it up, tucked it into the drawer by the front door, and smiled. Karen's house went on the market 6 months later. No bouvier, no yard sale, just a for sale sign and a moving truck. The gate? Still there, still locked, still facing the wall she insisted would never exist. Some folks say the new buyers plan to take it down. Others hope they leave it, just to keep the story alive. Me? I don't care either way, because that wall did exactly what it was supposed to do. It ended the nonsense. Funny thing about walls, people think they're built to keep things out. But sometimes a wall is what finally lets peace back in. After everything, the gate, the calls, the concrete, the fallout, things started to settle. No more contractors trespassing. No more flyers in my mailbox about shared lake access. No more HOA meeting invitations marked with subtle threats. Just peace. The kind I hadn't had since Karen decided my land was up for debate. The wall became more than concrete. It became symbolic. A quiet reminder that boundaries aren't just lines on paper. They're agreements. You respect mine, I'll respect yours. And the neighborhood finally got that. People stopped cutting across my slope. They stopped referring to the lake as ours and started saying his. No more assumptions. No more entitlement. Just quiet nod from folks driving by. Some even slowed down to take a second look, like the wall itself had become a local monument. I added a small, tasteful sign in the center of the wall. Nothing aggressive, just clear. Private property, no access, respect the boundary. Didn't need to say anything more. And honestly, that little plaque did what 100 emails never could. No more confused joggers. No more gate rattling. No more whispers at HOA cookouts. Just a simple understanding. You don't mess with land that doesn't belong to you. Karen? She didn't last long after the fallout. Lost her board position, her social clout, and eventually her home. Sold it quietly, like she'd never been there at all. A few neighbors said she moved to another town. One rumor claimed she tried joining another HOA. But after her name showed up on a background check, they passed. I never saw her again. Didn't need to. She left behind the gate and her story. And honestly, that was enough. The new neighbors are kind. They mow their lawn, wave when they see me, and don't try to cross a single line. I even helped them rebuild their back fence, strictly on their side of the property. We laughed about the Great Wall and shared lemonade in the shade. No drama, no power games, just neighbors being neighbors. The ranch feels like mine again. Every morning I walk down to the lake, coffee in hand, and breathe in the silence. No meetings, no notices, no arguments. Just me, the wind, the trees, and that wall. 6 feet tall, steady, unmoving. Proof that when you stand your ground the right way, with facts, law, and patience, no one can push you off it. Sometimes a wall isn't just concrete. It's a consequence. When Karen decided to build a gate into my land, she wasn't just putting up metal and hinges. She was crossing a line, not just on a map, but on principle. She thought she could twist the story, weaponize 911, and push her agenda through polite lies and HOA jargon. But she forgot one thing. Property lines aren't suggestions. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I documented. I called the right people. And when the time came, I built something she couldn't ignore and couldn't undo. The truth doesn't need permission. And when it's backed by deeds, maps, and the law itself, it becomes stronger than any fence she could have tried to climb. So if someone tries to erase your boundary, don't panic. Stay calm. Stay grounded. Document. Build. Enforce. Because when you stand up for what's yours with evidence, not ego, the law doesn't just protect you. It stands with you. And it stands tall. Right there in concrete. If they try to sneak in through your fence, remind them. What's built on lies can be buried in stone.